Hi, everyone, and welcome again to the virtual world, a podcast on everything to do with the industrial metaverse, Web 3.0, and anything immersive tech. And I'm so grateful to welcome back a dear friend of mine, but also someone who I really admire, who's someone who really understands corporate strategy so well. And we've kind of known each other for over 30 years. I hate to say that. But welcome back, Chris and Chris Gabriel. Chris, just please tell all listeners a bit about you and your role and the company you're working for today.
Hi, Nigel. Nice to be back. And I measure our relationship in terms of stones and kilos. And unfortunately, it's going in the wrong direction for me. Chris Gabriel, Chief Strategy Officer at Sapphire. I'm just recovering from about COVID, so hopefully I don't sound too miserable. And I look after the go-to-market. And my career is tech for 30 years plus in all aspects of it. Actually, I was thinking about this last night: in infrastructure, in cloud, in cyber, in applications, and hopefully not just a jack of all trades, but hopefully a decent understanding of the world and the stuff that's going on in it, I hope.
Great, thanks, Chris. I think again, one of the things I always try to do with my guests is kind of ask you bring something that's been meaningful to you. And I know last time you did, we talked about you brought this flag, Brazilian flag, that kind of really quite meaningful because it kind of represented a smart city project you did last time, and I think that was really great. But I've asked you to bring something else. I don't know what it is. So what have you brought that's meaningful to you?
Yeah, I'm slightly just rather embarrassed that I chose this one now, actually, but it was very meaningful because it was given to me yesterday. But it also shows why I measure myself in kilos and stones over our relationship. And it's a half a box of Ferrero Rocher. And the reason it was meaningful is I took, as many parents would have done this week, took our oldest back to university on Sunday after she was a month at home. And I just thought about it. It felt normal for a month, but obviously it's not normal because she's now at university and she doesn't live with us. Anyway, I managed to forget a bag of shopping and she's not that far away. So I had the excuse yesterday of driving back with a bag of shopping that I'd forgot to pack. Just the only excuse to give her another hug, to be honest. She mysteriously pulled out of her rucksack a box of Ferrero Rocher to thank us for a lovely Christmas and for taking her back to uni and being parents. And obviously I had a bit of a tear in the car on the way home. So, the point is it's half empty because we've already eaten the top layer. But and without linking it to this, because I wasn't trying to, that human contact of stuff is just, family is unimaginable, and that disconnection from people that you feel when you drop your eldest, even how proud you are of them dropping them back at university, is gut wrenching. So I'm hoping. Nothing to do but the metaverse and the world that we're moving into is some of those bonds get stronger rather than weaker. But anyway, so that's my it was yesterday. So I cried and ate a chocolate on the way home. So there we go.
Oh, excellent! But your Ferrero Rocher is not half empty; it's half full.
Well, actually, there's one missing from the bottom layer, so it's definitely just over half empty now. There you
go. I'm lost. Listen, but thank again, and that's a wonderful thing, and I'm so lovely to hear. And I couldn't agree more with you about the bonding. That is a fundamental part of human life. So thank you for that. And keep one of the Ferrero Rochers for me when I see you next. That'd be really good. Listen, but here we're talking about should business leaders really care about the industrial metaverse? And when it comes to operational improvement, I know this is really dear to your heart in terms of operational efficiency and process improvement. And I guess before we kind of start, before I ask you the first question, really, which is, sharing some of your experiences, how organizations are identifying the need to improve. I think it's really important that we kind of try and set the tone of what a business leader is, because to me, a business leader is not just who you might think as being a chief operating officer or anyone in the CX kind of bracket, or anyone in a VP director bracket. It's anyone actually leading a team, and then it could be a team in a manufacturing plant, it could be a team in the NHS, it could be a team anywhere. So it's anyone who's really a business leader who runs a team, runs an organization, runs a department, runs a region, runs a territory, anyone in that sphere. So with that in mind, can you how do you think business leaders are identifying business improvement opportunities today?
Yeah, it's actually really it's a great opening question, actually, isn't it? Because we talk about some of the things. We're going to talk about some of these big investments and some of these big transformations, and I think we end up quite rightly thinking of the top table, right? So the CXO level, in terms of having to get the checkbook and write, investment checks for transformation, for investments in technology platforms, things like the metaverse, industrial metaverse. But yeah, I'm agree with you. I think, and in a way, I'd actually say, without being too trite, is we are seeing a world where everybody, in a way, is a leader of the role they've got, the function that they provide, the tasks that they do, all the way up through to the CXO table. And I think we've never been in a position where we see business leaders looking for business improvement. But actually, I think individuals now don't need to do it that way anymore. Why can't, and how do I effectively lead the thing that I do and feed up or out or whatever it may be, in terms of how do I improve the role that I've got? And I think we talk at the minute, the big debate is the working from home, this kind of the self-empowered individual. But I think it's not about where you work from that's empowerment. It's how you work. It's how you do your job. It's how efficiently, how much you think you contribute to your business. So I think leadership. I love it when I'm on a chat room with a company, because everybody chats these days, don't they? Right. And I was having to chat with my energy company because I thought they'd buggered something up in my account, and actually they were paying me some money, because when they transferred between systems, the person on it was a leader to me, because they sorted my problem out. They actually, I'm sure they made a decision based on parameters they were allowed to. But I that to me is a leader, right? Someone who takes ownership and responsibility for something. And I think in this business improvement world, this democratization of being able to take ownership of business improvement, I've seen it really start to become much more of a dialogue and a discussion and a way that organizations are thinking now. Because one, it's a great thing to do, and secondly, because of this communication model we've got, because of the digitization of things, is the ability for people to feed up and to make change, I think has never been great. So clearly there's functional responsibility, there's different layers in a business, but actually, we all know that change comes from more of a mass willingness to do that. And I think the more we empower people to change and to challenge and to improve their own lives, functions, roles, tasks, even, then I think that's what businesses should be aiming for.
That's really interesting. So really, it's today business improvement is where everyone is not just involved per se, but actually anyone can identify it and take that self-responsibility. So I think
I think it's critical, Nigel, because what are the main challenges of operational structures today is
that's the next question.
we're trying to, if you try and change something based on the model or the structure and hierarchy that you've always had, you'll probably get roughly the same outcome as you've always got, right? I saw a thing yesterday where an institution had pulled a tender. It was in one of the main publications, the Register in the UK. Major institution, I won't mention even which sector it was in, had pulled a big ERP replacement project, 20 million quid contract. They pulled the tender and we're going to reissue it because they said, well, in reality, our requirements have changed and we really hadn't captured them. And now, once we'd started the process of spending 20 million quid, we went into the organisation and actually talked to people and found out that what we were going to buy wasn't what people wanted, right? And didn't reflect the business as it was today. And I think that's part of this operational challenge. Is you think you know how your business works, and then you actually get into putting a new system in the way you think your business works, and actually your business doesn't work that way at all, right? And we see that. I know we're going to talk about it in a bit, but process mining is really interesting for me. because actually it tells you how people really do their jobs, not how you think they do their jobs, right? People, process, and technology, and you think people do something, you then actually find out how they really do it to get the job done in the most efficient way they think to be done, and it usually doesn't follow the way that you think it should work, right? And people subvert, they put their own mechanisms in. So I think the biggest operational challenge today is really understanding what the as is, and genuinely understanding what the as is, and then trying to build what the to be should look like in the most, I'm going to use the word organic way, but in the most effective way that aligns to what the jobs that you're trying to get done, right? And really getting under the skin of that. And I think that's the challenge, and also the opportunity, because we can now do that, like we've never been able to do in the past, right? We don't need a generic time and motion study anymore. We can really finesse and understand how organizations work and how we want them to work.
Yeah, that's interesting, because again, I'm quite passionate about, from my own personal history in this space, and seeing dozens and dozens, in fact not hundreds, of organizations that I've had the pleasure of talking to over my couple last decades, is moving from assumptive decisions versus to truth or factual decisions about what's actually going on. And I think there's no reason why today anyone should be able to make an assumption, even when we're talking about time and motion studies.
100%.
A lot of them were manually identified, and again weren't truly looking at everything. But I think there's no excuse anymore, because the technology is really there. It's interesting that you're talking about earlier about terms of the technology obviously being very present today to make the truth be more realistic and available. But actually, when you talk about the RFP being taken out, and I wonder if there was anything around the future of the industrial metaverse really kind of coming in. And then I know you're very smart on this, and particularly around the process mining element. But I think in your opinion, how do you think there's a lot of limitations in operational improvement today? No question about it. Process mining, a big positive.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, how do you think the industrial metaverse will begin to solve the limitations of operational improvement or business process improvement?
Yeah, and you just something jumped in my head as you were talking then, and it riles me, actually, really gets on my nerves. Is obviously we're all on LinkedIn, aren't we, right? And we all see these posts from people, and I see it over and over again. 70% of all digital projects fail to deliver and as an industry, we're basically saying 70% of all the things we do fail to deliver the things that we said and the customer wanted, or the customer said they wanted and couldn't define and specify. That's an incredible failure rate, right? Now, there's some good reasons behind that, right? But as an industry, we're the future, we're this wonderful digital technology, and yet we keep talking about 70% of all digital projects fail, right? Well, that's a horrendous. Thankfully, we're not surgeons, right, in an operating theatre. Anyway, because that would be horrendous. So how do I think the industrial metaverse, and we, going to use the word industrial business metaverse, I think is another one, is I think it's really difficult to see businesses at an operational level through the tools that we've always had to look at them in. And what I mean by that is a spreadsheet, a workflow. You've been in that space for a long time, right? You can map it out on how we should do things, how we think that process works, how those systems talk together. But actually, it doesn't really show you how a business works. And so I think one of the, and I know if you look at the industrial metaverse today and where the investment's gone, it's employee onboarding, it's training and education, right? Certification in many industries, oil, gas, and all those kind of good things. I think they're really good things. I think this whole exploration of businesses from a operational process level, and whether it's service operations, finance operations, supply chain operations, I think the ability to represent and visualize businesses in a different way, and how from a macro level all the way through to an individual level that they are working, I think is a really exciting and really relevant opportunity to get organizations immersed in this concept of the metaverse, right? The visualization of the world in a different way, by feeding in. I think for me, the way that happened is that what we know is the systems that we use have got these deep capabilities now to show how they're working, but we look at them on a 2D screen with the process flow, and I was just showing someone one a second ago, right, from one of the big process mining tools, and it looks good on the screen, right? I can see things moving and it's animated, but actually what I want to do is sit there in my business and look around and see where there's different opportunities to improve the business. And it might be, and the way I think about it is, we do satisfaction surveys of our businesses all the time. Why can't I look around my business and see where there's low satisfaction, right? And then drill down into why that's slightly low satisfaction. And ultimately it'll be to do with, people, poor management, or whatever it may be, probably to do with, compensation, but actually it will be due to the fact that people find it really hard to do their jobs. Why do I have to wait for somebody to tell me that? Why can't I see it? So I think this visualization, operational visualization of businesses in the industrial metaverse, before we get into fixing machines and all the other things that it will do, maintenance and all the other different aspects of it, I think is a really powerful capability of it. And I think if you could put a headset on a CEO, a CFO, a COO, whatever it may be, and let them see their business and where the pinch points are, where the cash flow is poor, because actually I'm seeing cash flow poor over here because I've got poor service delivery over here, which is delivered by poor system. I think that visualization is going to be really powerful. So I think feeding in insights from these systems across our business, feeding in augmented tools like process mining, I think is a real first 2023 killer opportunity for the industrial metaverse as kind of a real value point for it.
You've talked about something there about, as you were talking, and again, we do this every time we get together, we kind of talk to each other and things happen in our own individual brains that kind of take it off on a different tangent. But very quickly, you talked about systems, and I've been very keen to be watching certain system providers, software vendors, and their approach to getting ready for the industrial metaverse. And I know that you have a very strong track record. You come from the vendor community, and obviously at Sapphire Systems today, you represent some of the best vendors in the space. What are you seeing in that community from the software vendors getting ready themselves for the industrial metaverse, but also more importantly, how those vendors are going to help organizations get ready?
Yeah, I think they're more ready than they know they are. And what I mean by that is, if I look at some of the things that we talk about today with those vendors, whether it's SAP or say ServiceNow, two great examples for partners of ours, but Hexagon in terms of the asset management space, these vendors who are providing these systems, we talk about things like citizen developers, right? Well, a citizen developer is enabling someone all the way through your organization to create something, to do a task or a function or a job more effectively, create their own code. But we talk about the process mining piece, where we can see how things are, jobs are being done. But are we providing that insight all the way to the people who really want to see, how it works, and all the way back up to the top of organizations? So I actually think the data is there to be able to mine and visualize and see our businesses in different ways. I think, interestingly, we talk about systems integration at an operating level. We don't talk about it at a visualization level. So we integrate all of these big systems together. But I think if I look at low-code application development, citizen developers, if I look at data science, analytics, feeding insights up to people, if I look at mining how our operations and processes work at all of that's out there today. I think it's being visualized and seen and experienced through, well, we're looking at it now through a laptop, right? And there's no harm in looking at it through a laptop, but we're looking at it through kind of a world 1.0 interface and not this 2.0 interface. And then how do we interact and how do we relate and mesh and mold that data so I can see that in a more effective way? And actually, if I'm in that world and I see a process that's broken, and I think we talked about this a little bit ago, I can call up my digital an analyst to go and have a look at it. So I'm the CFO. I'm looking at finance. I see some process things that's being fed to me. Why can't I instantly go and deploy a digital analyst to go and have a look at that? Well, all of that technology kind of exists today, right? So I think it is maybe it's the way the industrial metaverse is spoken about. It's either, big grand concepts, or it's quite difficult to experience in a meaningful way. But I think all of the core vendors that we deal with are already in a place where the data is there, the insights there, the tools are coming that I can deploy in the Terraverse or the meta kind of the industrial metaverse. And I think it's gonna maybe 2023, 2024 for us to start to build some of those, those use cases and build some of those experiences that the CEO goes, first thing in the morning, I'm sticking on my headset and I'm walking around my business and having a look how we're doing today, right? Instead of I've got a 74-page board report and a KPI dashboard that I've got to wade through, right? So I think, so I'm more, the reason I'm excited about it is not because it's a flight of fancy, is I think the stuff that we're doing in businesses now needs a new experience to really harness and maximize it. And I don't think we'll maximize automation if we look at it through the old lens. I think we'll struggle. And I think if we can translate it into like an industrial metaverse, and I would absolutely 100% personally, I think process operational improvement, I think that is, to me, is a killer application to experience and explore and execute change, which is the key. Seeing it is brilliant, right? Doing it, executing on it, changing it is the critical thing for most businesses. I think that intersection, we're there now. I just think we just need to start applying it and building some of those out for our customers.
Yeah, I think a couple of points just to mention is obviously, any market this early is void of use cases, and I think that's what we need to help bring to the conversation, particularly what Sapphire Systems is doing, particularly around the conversation ownership. But what you talked about in terms of data, as a sector on our side, across all of us as being in the immersive technology space and the industrial metaverse space, generally, not me personally, but generally, everyone's waiting for the big Apple reveal of the new integrated VR augmented reality headset, right? But actually, it means nothing without the data. And it's actually the same if you're a gamer. You can put a headset on without the technology of the game itself. You're seeing nothing.
Yeah.
So it's that converging of those worlds about the hardware, but what is the data that's going to be displayed in that experience? I think that's why it's really interesting you're talking about the likes of SAP and ServiceNow, who are kind of ready, improving. And I think so that's the step change. It's really exciting over the next 12, 24, 36 months how it's going to play out.
Yeah, Nigel, and I think if you take these operating platform companies, the Salesforces as well, the Hexagons in the enterprise asset management side, I think that operational layer of businesses, because if you think about it, that's how most businesses operate, right? At that layer. I know, Microsoft, in terms of even 365, have got a huge amount of data that's mined behind how organizations work. And you can actually bring a Microsoft consultant in and they'll talk to you how you're, even to the fact that they'll tell you who's doing emails when they're sitting on the Teams and they should be concentrating, and so really kind of operating. So if I took that tier, I think that is, to me, is the number one tier that the industrial metaverse will be driven by and we'll get excited by, right? Because I think, and if I bring it back to the reality of the world we're in, and I bring it back to the UK, we have a productivity issue, right? How do I see that? How do I see that productivity issue? How do I enable my people to do better jobs? How do I do it when they're all working from home, when I don't know how they're how they're seeing, how they're operating? So I think that layer for me is incredibly exciting, and I think those companies are there. And I think, going back to the Apple thing you mentioned, I've talked about this for a while now, this second digital decade that we're in, which is 2020 to 2030 for me, is there's three things that we're driving it, which is democratization of technology, personalization of experiences, and automation, right? And if I look at those three things, Apple bringing out whatever they do, just as they did with the the smartphone initially, and then the iPad, just creates that application acceleration and growth. The personalization for me is around data. It's around and that from the metaverse perspective is fundamental, right? How does my business look? How does it personalize to my world or my job or my function? And then clearly, I want to change stuff, and what I don't want to do is see it and think it's amazing and then go, oh, but I've got to take 7, 8, 12 weeks, months to get something done. So then I want to be able to execute on change. And with the level of automation now we're coming in those tools, I really genuinely think that a CFO, CEO, leader, all the way down to department head or even further, will be able to immerse themselves in that world and then deploy the technologies to improve their business. And clearly, governance, coordination, all those things, right? We're not going to have people changing the business at will, but I think if we get that right, but I think that democratization and the availability of all of these technologies is the bit that's really exciting. Apple headset, or masses of automation, process mining, data tools, deployment of these things just getting really, really exciting, and I think will make this industrial metaverse really real for businesses.
Yeah, and I think you and I have spoken about quite a bit actually about when we first got to know each other in the mid-90s. Then we're now seeing the convergence of all those technology. You actually talked about it in your own career, how you've been in the infrastructure side, you've been all these kind of areas of pillars of technology, and now it's all coming together, which is super exciting. And I'm very blessed that you have agreed to do a series of these LinkedIn live sessions and podcasts, and we're going to delve deeper into the actual practicalities of things like process mining, so our listeners can really get really good advice of tools and techniques and strategies. But the industrial metaverse, if I'm going to ask you another question, which is really a broad church word, really, or a question, as we go through the following weeks of the series of conversations you and I are going to have, but what advice would you give business leaders to start thinking about the industrial metaverse in terms of what it is, how they start thinking about it from a strategic perspective, and then as we get deeper into the practicalities of how they can deploy solutions to be able to play in the industrial metaverse? But what advice would you give business leaders, considering that business leaders are, you can be running a team, you can be a manager, you can be executive, you can be an owner, you can be anything. But what advice would you give?
Yeah, and I think the first thing for me is don't write any massive mega checks, right? In the billion, don't be practical about where it is and where you are. The first one for me is where I think the 3 E's for me. It's about experiencing business in a different way. It's about exploring it. So experiencing things like the things that we talked about. It's about exploring how your business is operating, how it delivers the services, and then it's executing on change, right? And I think for me, those are the 3 things. If I'm a leader, I'm thinking about the metaverse. How can I get me, my people, my customers to experience my business in different ways? How can I explore how it operates and how we deliver what we do? And then how can I execute some level of change? Because without the final thing, it's all funky, but it's change that really drives the business case. So on that basis, the first thing I'll be honest, I would be doing is I'd be looking for opportunities to do one of those first 2 things, probably, right? Because the execution bit, I think obviously always comes later. There'll be some obvious areas in certain industries like utilities, where or anywhere where there's things like maintenance, digital twins, and those manufacturing style, provider style industries. But I would think about some of the areas in your business where one of those first 2 things, where you can experience it or explore it in different ways, exciting. For me, I'd be knocking on those big vendors' doors and asking them what they're doing. And I would not be accepting here's a cool new way of delivering service operations or finance operations or supply chain operations without some level of but tell me how you're going to really accelerate how this is going to work in my business. So I'd be intelligently but cautiously and practically looking at my business and how those first two, the experience and the exploration, could be beneficial to me. And then I would be really knocking on the doors of some of those really, the vendors that I spend money with, to go, how can you help me realize this vision, on the basis that they will bring some of it, and then there'll be a level of you've got to piece it together in some other some other areas, with partnerships or with third parties or your own folks. So but I think challenging yourself as a business, and then challenging some of your people you spend money with to operate your business, they'd be ultimately the first people I'd be talking to, right? Because they help you operate your business today. They should be able to help you see how you're going to operate it in the future. And maybe some of that will be on a slide deck, but it should be becoming more tangible, and a bit of a roadmap of where they think that's going to do, and where they think you're going to see most value from their aspect. So is it 360-degree view of your customer with Salesforce? Is it 360-degree view that you can explore on your supply chain with SAP? Is it a view of service operations you can explore with ServiceNow? Is it a view of your assets you could explore with Hexagon? And really start to piece that together in terms of where the value is for your business.
And you bring up a very good point, actually, because we start talking about challenging ourselves internally. It's actually who you listen to as well, because I've had a lot of conversations recently where people have described the industrial metaverse, or the metaverse, however you want to put it, in actually the business metaverse, which is another great term, as being a disruptor. But actually, to me, it's not a disruptor. And I'd be cautious of anyone who's saying that it is. You should be listening to that. You should be listening. This is a converger. It's an amalgamator. It's actually delivering opportunities.
Yeah.
So it's not. I mean, people think, disruptive technology, I'm doing because I might get a high valuation in my business. But actually, no, it is this opportunity through amalgamation, through convergence. And I think we have to be very cautious who we listen to. I think it's great advice that you're giving there. Would you agree with that?
I think, and again, we could be wrong. So I'm going to be as humble as to say, definitely, I think it's the most natural evolution of where we are today and where we need to be over the next few years. That is, to be honest, is true value-based digitization to me. And I go back to whether it's a nurse on a hospital ward, whether it's a city planner, whether it's a process engineer within a business, whether it's being able to see the world and experience it and explore it and make it really relevant, so you can execute on something through the data we've been creating for the last few decades. From all of the things that we've been creating needs, in a way, a vehicle to bring it together. And I actually think so I think it's the most natural evolution. It's the next step of value from digitization, that as long as it's and I think being delivered by these big players is really fundamental to that. Although there will be people who come and augment it and enhance it and all those things, right? So that's always the case in our industry. But yeah, no, I don't think it is a massive disruption. I think it's the biggest natural evolution of digitization that will be incredibly powerful. And I genuinely think we are closer to it in some of the technologies that we find difficult to visualize today. So digital workers being a great one for me. If you could see them and see what, you'd just be the most. So I'm 100% agree. Don't the whole disruption thing. I don't see it. I see it as an evolution. I see it as a really natural and needed evolution. So we end up at the end of this decade with real value-based digitization that's empowering people across multiple industries and multiple roles to really move to next evolutions of productivity, personal satisfaction with their jobs, all of the things that we want, right? Which will ultimately end up in growth, profitability, and all the things that the economy needs, right?
I also think another view could be, which I kind of I like myself, because I kind of, this is the way I think about it, actually, because I've been involved in so many large transformational projects in my career, that this is actually the industrial revolution industrial metaverse, business metaverse, is an inflection point because it could end the phrase digital transformation. It is the end point of digital transformation. So boards, committees, funding committees, IT department, everyone could actually get to a point where this thing called digital transformation has a finite end, and then we transform, or we have a different definition of transformation, which is engagement transformation, which is different. So the technology bit ends and human begins.
I was watching, if anybody's got Netflix, I think it's on Netflix, the Glass Onion series with Daniel Craig as a detective in it. Anyway, I thought it was really. I thought I'd listen to some TED Talk. When I've probably had too much Bacardi and Diet Coke over Christmas. And I woke up and I went, oh my God, I was listening to a podcast around this thing, and this chap was talking about these small changes that happen, and at some point there's an infraction point rather than an inflection point where a bigger thing happens. And because people have bought into all the small things happening, this bigger thing happening, that can be a good or a bad thing, is I think all of these little small things that have been changing in all the areas we've spoken about, I think the metaverse is just the infraction point of bringing those together, inflection, whatever it may be, right? Because we'll get frustrated with the progress we're then not making with the other things, right? Because we'll go, oh my God, why can't I get more product? Why can't I deliver new services to my people? Why can't I fix my business more quickly? Why can't I find areas of automation that I could find more value from? Why can't I give people the data they need? At some point, the frustration with digitization 2.0 will create that infraction point where people want that next level. And I don't, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a very natural. We get frustrated. We fix things when we get frustrated with the old thing, right? And I do think the whole sitting in front of a screen, seeing my business through traditional interfaces, not being able to explore it quickly, I think will just frustrate people and go, look, I've got all this I've got this stuff. Why can't I see it in a different way? So I think that probably is why for me it's exciting, and why it's an evolution, and why the sooner we can create real use cases and value and experiences for people so they see the real value of it, I think is really important.
Yeah, and it's great. I always love talking to you, Chris. I think we always have this we create these new terms for ourselves as we talk. But I think, inflection versus inflection, I think it's a very valid point, and I really am grateful for you saying that. I think it's helped me in my own mind consider how it's done. And I think it goes back to something you said at the very beginning, actually, when you were talking, you're making a reference to how many projects fail. And thank God we aren't surgeons, right? And you actually said all these good reasons why digital transformation projects fail. Well, actually, there was no ever good reason why things fail. There's no bad reason why things fail.
Yeah.
So I think again, it's really exciting times for us. Particularly for me, as trying to come towards the end of this decade, kind of towards the end of my career, almost. That this is the moment in time when things like the industrial metaverse, the business metaverse, or Web 3.0. Or just this whole ability to have a different human experience of data it's very, very exciting. And it's really great to be working alongside Sapphire Systems as well. So, as we kind of close out this particular introduction conversation, if you like, to the beginning of our series, and I know that next time when we have a chat the next week or so, Sapphire is thinking about potentially having an online event where you might be able to be helping listeners or people who attend that event actually get some real good advice from you. Is that something that we're going to be thinking about?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, Nigel. One is I want to bring some smarter people than me along to talk to you from our business and maybe from outside our business to dig a bit deeper into some of these things. So I've got a few people lined up, which I think will make this more real for people, and we'll show some kind of examples of where we are today, and then we'll actually show some stuff which I think is really, really, really interesting and where that can go. And then absolutely, I think we want to hold a kind of an online event in kind of February timeframe with yourself and a couple of guests, and then actually at the back of that, maybe do a proof of concept or so with a couple of customers and offer a bit of a workshop that we can get in a room with some of your folks and some of our folks and see where this, where we can add value to customers. So I think, I really want to see this year as the year that we make it more more tangible and real for our customers as a whole, so they get to understand it and experience it. But also a few of them get to touch some stuff, and I'm really keen. And I know that some of our big vendor partners are keen to do some of that as well. So we want to try and create that next. And I think service operations is a big one for me, and ERP and supply chain operations. So hopefully we'll be bringing SAP and ServiceNow along as well to talk about it. So.
And that's great, and I'm thankful to Sapphire Systems, because the market needs companies like yourselves to help get this us away from talking about the tech and actually talking about use cases and talking about strategy and implementation. So it's really valuable that you're taking this step up. So I really appreciate it. I'm very much looking forward to our next session, where we're going to talk about process mining a bit more detail, and great, you're going to bring some guests along. So Chris, I want to thank you very, very much, and for taking the time. I know you've been ill as well, so I really double appreciate it. And
I've been sat here looking at these 7 Ferrero Rochers that are left throughout the whole thing, Nigel. So there might be 6 in a minute.
Well, knowing you, probably about 5 in a couple of minutes.
No, thanks for inviting me again.
Thank you, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Cheers, buddy. Take care.
Cheers, Nigel.